Today we'll be covering yet another icon from Halloween Horror Nights past, whose surgical style is a bit unorthodox, but we will go more in depth on this episode of Horrifying History. Welcome everybody, it's Michael from Hollowed Thrills, and before we start our trip down through the Hollowed Past, be sure that you subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post a video. And now, let's get started with today's icon. The icon that we'll be covering today, if you haven't figured it out already, is Dr. Albert Kane, as he is better known as the Caretaker. The backstory of Dr. Kane is as follows. In his early life, he was a very well-known and respected surgeon, but eventually became the caretaker of Shady Oak Cemetery in Willamette Valley. The original mansion that him and his family lived in was eventually changed to a funeral parlor, but throughout Kane's life as a surgeon, he always wondered what happened to the patients that he didn't save, and eventually these thoughts turned to action as he and his family started to do experiments on the deceased, with his main goal to discover the nature of the soul. And to get fresh people for his experiments, he would pose as a type of a helper for the homeless, trying to support them through their issues. And then he would actually put them through very gruesome surgeries, often fully conscious and with no anesthesia. During these surgeries, Kane would keep notes and audio recordings, which eventually were the reason for his developing insanity. Eventually, word spread around about the disappearances and the antics of the Kane family, and the police ensued their investigation. During the investigations, the Kane family was put on house arrest, and delighted by the fact that people were actually interested in his work, Dr. Kane eventually shared his experimental findings with the police, which in turn made national headlines due to the gruesome fact of said experiments. As the townsfolk of the deceased people that Dr. Kane operated on started to riot after they had found out the news of the gruesome surgeries that had been put on their loved ones, they eventually made it to the Kane mansion, where they had set fire to the Kane family mansion and trapped the Kane family inside. Eventually, after the building had burned to the ground, the police did an investigation on the remains of the building, and no bodies were found of the Kane family. But what was found was a long system of tunnels that traveled underneath of the graveyard that Dr. Kane worked at. And in those tunnels, they had found his notes from his many experiments, as well as all of the audio recordings. A year following the fire at the cemetery, the remains of the Kane mansion were being set to be demolished, but the mysteries that still haunted the property were being investigated further. They had 3 different groups of people that decided to go and try to investigate what had happened at the graveyard, and all 3 of said groups went missing. And that leads one question: is the Kane family still alive, and how did they escape? The inspiration behind Dr. Kane stems from many different things, such as the Victorian serial killers Jack the Ripper and Sweeney Todd. His family inspiration came directly linked to the Charlie Manson family, and the outcome for all of them being slightly reminiscent of Freddy Krueger of Nightmare on Elm Street. Dr. Kane is described as a tall man with a sunken, skull-like face, dressed in tattered suits and wearing a matching top hat, and as always found with his signature weapon, a large clamp claw that is a cross between a hedge clipper and a surgical clamp. The many appearances of Dr. Kane at Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights event start off at HHN 12 in 2002, where he appeared in a house named Scream House, a scare zone named Port of Evil, and a show called Town Square of Tortured Souls, where Caretaker's minions would torture people on a stage throughout the night. His next appearance would be at HHN 13 at Scream House Revisited. And then again, he would make another appearance the following year at HHN 14 in Horror Nights Nightmares. He then took a 1-year hiatus, only to return at the Sweet 16 in Scream House Resurrection, and also in the Arrival show, as well as Horror Comes Home Scare Zone. Following the Sweet 16, he disappeared for a few years, only to return in the unofficial Shadows from the Past Scare Zone at HHN 19, which appeared for the last few nights of the event, teasing the next year's event. Which at HHN 20, the Caretaker returned to the Fear Revealed Scare Zone and the house Horror Nights The Hallowed Past. Since the 20th anniversary, he has only appeared in one other event, which at this time has been HHN 25, in the Icon Scare Zone and in Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem. There has now been a 5-year gap since his last appearance, which leads me to believe that he is set to return at this year's 30th anniversary. But will he be in a house, a scare zone, or both? Only time will tell if Dr. Kane returns to claim his next guinea pig. And with that, that wraps up today's episode of Horrifying History. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment below and tell me what icon you would like me to do next. And as always, I'm Michael, and this has been Hallowed Thrills, and I'll see you guys next time.